Welcome back, Honors. Oh man, I'm tired. It's like we had a long practice yesterday. It's about 7:30 on a Sunday right now. Getting all this stuff buffed out, getting it posted for you. A lot of the CP kids are probably going to be a little upset because I think y'all's is going to be shorter than theirs was because they just had like a really, really large flip they had to finish up. But, it's okay. We're going to talk about some cool stories. We're going to talk about Martin Luther and his presence and his rise up in Reformation. So basically, in this flip, we're going to go all the Martin Luther stuff, and then we're going to get all the way up to Henry VIII, which love talking about Henry VIII in class. Makes me so happy. Y'all's test is slated for probably Friday, all right? I hate to do that to you. I know it's a Friday, but it's slated as of right now for Friday, all right? Just to give you a heads up. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get into this bad boy. So we stopped here last time. We were talking about the corruption in the Catholic Church. We're talking about the Great Western Schism. We were talking about just the terrible, terrible situation that was going on. Talked about like one of the popes calling all the cardinals out for being terrible Catholics and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then we talked about Leo X, the Medici Pope, sending this guy, Johann Tetzel, to Germany to try and raise funds to rebuild St. Peter's in grandiose style, right? Not like it is nice already, to fix it up. And these indulgences were supposed to get your family that's already in purgatory out as well as you, right? So, but going forward, though, the next guy is going to rise up. He's going to finally have his voice heard. By the way, remember, we have an art quiz tomorrow. Don't forget, okay? We have an art quiz tomorrow. Do not forget, all right? So anyway, these indulgences are supposed to get not only your family members out, but you. This man is going to be wildly upset about it. Martin Luther, a young German priest, right? Now, he originally had a lot of different protests to this entire movement, and he tried to have his voice heard, but no one would actually listen to him. So, according to legend, there's a couple legends I got to tell you about him. According to legend, he then wrote his very famous document, the 95 Theses. Yeah, there it is, right? Put a star next to it. It's very, very important. 95 Theses, and nailed it to the door of a church, right? In I think it's in Nuremberg or Worms. It's one of the two German cities. It's either Nuremberg or Worms. But he's going to nail it to the door of a church, and I'm pretty confident it's in Nuremberg. Because due to the fact that churches were your local meeting place and everybody went to church every single day, it was almost like a public bannerment, right? You're like posting your ideas where everyone will see them. Here's the thing about the 95 Theses, though. A lot of revisionist historians believe that the chances is that he actually probably didn't nail it to the door of a church because it probably would have brought a lot of negativity onto him, possibly some trials by the Inquisition. So we believe now that the 95 Theses may have been a letter that he actually wrote to another bishop somewhere, or to a cardinal possibly, protesting the views of the Catholic Church. But regardless, it's not about where he posted it. Wow, that's creepy. I did not mean to click on that. Don't write that down, but I'm not even kidding. I think this is like some divine intervention right here. So anyway, but it's all about this machine, right? It's all about the fact that it's not about where he posted it. Without the printing press, he would have never been able to get his message out there, right? So once the bishop and Martin Luther and the printers all got a hold of this message, it began to be printed and just shipped out all over Europe, right? So it was honestly like the very first viral message, if you will. It was something that people were like, hey, did you hear about this German kid? And like, he just like this German guy, this priest, he's like said these things. He says indulgences are wrong, and he's also saying that the church is corrupt and da 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 da. So anyway, there we go. Oh, too far. There we go. So this is a picture of the young Martin Luther, right? Now, sorry, I'm just imagining Pat Miller with that hair because of the joke on Friday. But, right? So, anyway, Martin Luther, fun story about him as well. Raised actually by not in a very, 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 he wasn't raised in a convent or a monastery. He wasn't one of these orphans that were dropped off there. He was raised by a very, very stable German home, and he actually went to school to become a lawyer. Now, while he was in school becoming a lawyer, he was running during a thunderstorm, and according to legend, he's petrified of lightning, and he's running and he's running and he's running, and a lightning bolt strikes very, very close by. And according to the legend, he got down on his knees and he said, Saint Anne, if you save me from this storm, I'll become a priest. Well, somebody never talked to him scientifically about the fact that if lightning strikes close by you, the chances of it actually striking you are very slim due to the proximity of the last strike. But he followed up on his bet with St. Anne, and he became a priest, right? So in his 95 Theses, 3 big themes are going to be prevalent, right? Number 1, he's going to disapprove of indulgences, right? He's going to say that the indulgences this is a key phrase too, if you read the Bible, that the indulgences are meant to be good deeds, they are not meant to be things that can be bought or purchased. Because he was very upset, speaking of this point, with the fact that the Catholic Church at the time was taking the biblical text and bending it to their necessities, right? Bending it to what they believed was necessary for them. Also, he's going to criticize the Pope heavily, which is Leo X at the time, the Medici Pope. He's going to be like, the popes are living fabulous lives, and they have never known what it's like to be hungry, and da-da-da-da-da. Very, very upset stuff. And then also, he's going to talk down about the culture of the church itself, particularly the dependency that the Catholic Church has set up to require people to be dependent on the priests, the monks, the cardinals, not dependent on Christ and the Spirit of God himself, right? So Lutherans actually have some really, really cool ideas. So going forward, though, the Pope is going to excommunicate Luther almost immediately, right? And then he's going to issue a diet and an edict, all right? So first and foremost, don't write edict yet. Don't write that yet. Just put excommunicated Luther. There's a major, major thing that happened. It's called the Diet of Worms. Diet, D-I-E-T, diet, as in like you're going on a diet, right? But a diet is a papal meeting, right? I talked about Jan Hus earlier in the last flip. Jan Hus, the guy that actually went, Rufus, stop saying like that. No, the guy that actually went to a diet and they told him he would have safe passage, then they burned him at the stake because he said that the church is like super, super immoral, and he like started his own thing called the Hussites. So the Diet of Worms was in the city of Worms, Germany. And in Worms, he says, or they tell Martin Luther, renounce the things you've said, take back the things you've said, and we won't send you to the Inquisition, and we may reinstate you in the church, but take back these terrible things you've said. And Luther responded with, no. And so he actually refused to do these things. After this diet, the Edict of Worms is going to be issued, declaring Luther and his followers to be outlaws. Guess what Martin Luther is going to do with copies of that bad boy? He's going to do the same thing the Pope did with the copies of the 95 Theses. That's right. Before all this stuff happened, the 95 Theses was getting printed and shot out all over Europe, right? The Pope was having these massive displays of anti-Luther Semitism, or like not Semitism, that's the wrong word, sentiment, and he would have like copies of the 95 Theses burned in churches, and he's like, and all this is lies. So when the Edict of Worms comes out, and the Pope starts writing letters to Luther saying, denounce this, take it all back, he starts having these big letter burnings of the Pope. He's burning letters from the Pope in squares in Germany. He's like, or Holy Roman Empire, and he's like, how you like me now? So it's a very, very neat little like dynamic going on between them. But yes, the Diet of Worms was the meeting. The Edict of Worms is the thing that's going to come out after it. So this is unintentionally going to start a new denomination of Christianity called Lutheranism. Speaking of unintentionally, really, really fast, Martin Luther had no intention of starting a new faith. He had no intention of giving the Reformation the bones of which it would operate with. He kind of was like the chicken that just hatched all the eggs that had been around for like almost 100 years. John Wycliffe had been saying these things already. Jan Hus had been saying these things already. Sir Thomas More had been writing about them already. Erasmus, a guy that died 10 years before him, had been saying the same kind of stuff. We'll talk about Erasmus and Zwingli when we talk about Henry VIII, but I'm just saying, these other people had these ideas. Martin Luther was simply like the light, the match that lit the stick of dynamite, right? He didn't mean to do it, but it happened. He actually had every intention, if the Catholic Church would reform its ways, of going back to being Catholic again, but they just wouldn't do it. So anyway, going forward though, Lutheranism operates off three key beliefs. All right? Grace alone, which means it's about your connection with God, right? Your connection with God through the grace of God and the dependency of God is the thing that leads you to salvation. Then faith alone, that God knows your true connection with Him because He knows your soul, right? So your faith must be unending, right? So the idea that like you can't hide your faith, you can't lie to God. He will know, all right? He will know. He is God, in fact, right? And Scripture alone, as in read the Bible for yourself. Stop relying on someone else to read it to you. So he's also going to advocate for some of the earliest translations of the Bible into vernacular languages, right? Actually, Jan Hus was one of the very first ones that did it before him. He had it translated into Czech. So, like, this is a really, really, really big shakeup because this is not how the Catholic Church operates during this time period. The Catholic Church operates still much like the one you know of today. Very, very ritualistic, very meditative, very, very, you need the priest to bless the bread. That's the other thing too. Somewhere in this, just write this down. Luther is firmly against transubstantiation, all right? We'll talk about the transubstantiation debate in class, talk about like the differences and what, they didn't like take the Eucharist out, they just didn't think it actually turned in, but disapproves of transubstantiation. We'll talk about it in class because it's a very complex argument. We're going to make like a little chart, okay? So anyway, but grace alone, faith alone, Scripture alone, got it? All right, anyway, let's keep going. So, other reformers are going to pop up as well after Martin Luther. Martin Luther is going to continue to reform a lot of different things. He's going to do, one really, really cool thing, speaking of his as well, he's also going to allow women to become priests. Anyway, other reformers are going to pop up as well, though. John Calvin happens to be one of these most famous reformers. He's French. He's going to create this thing called Calvinism, right? Calvinism revolves around the ideas of predestination. Now, really, really quickly, we'll talk about them a little bit tomorrow when we get into class, because I'd really like to show you a couple of pictures of like some heads and some sticks and stuff like that. Because if you look at like a spectrum, right? If we were to talk about like conservative, liberal, progressive, unchangeable, things like that, right? Strict, loose, like there's a spectrum. There's a big line, okay? So Lutherans would be considered like your very like hippie liberals at this time, right? They would be like, oh yeah, we're going to change everything up. It's going to be much more about you and God, a lot less about priests and stuff like that. The Catholic Church would be more conservative. They would be like, you need the priest, you need to do this, don't change everything too much. Calvinists, on the other hand, way over there, right? Like all the way over to the like very, very far, like let's take it back to the Stone Age kind of stuff. Like they disapprove of everything. Singing loudly in the streets. They disapprove of wearing colors that aren't black and white. They disapprove of, what else? They disapprove of alcohol. They disapprove of the theater. They disapprove of not going to church every day. So church attendance is mandatory. You could be fined. You could get a ticket from a Calvinist for not going to church, right? So Calvinists, different types of Calvinists include Puritans and Huguenots and Anabaptists, and a lot of different types, okay? So anyway, but he's a Frenchman, okay? We're going to talk about his Genevan consistory if we get a chance. He's going to create Calvinism, and Calvinism operates around the idea that now you can see how strict they are, predestination. God knows your whole life before you ever even live it. God knows that before you're even born, if you're going to heaven or not, that is how it is, right? So church attendance is required. It's a very serious thing. All right. So anyway, that's where we're going to go ahead and wrap up for now. I think if we get a chance tomorrow, we'll talk about how Presbyterianism is going to spread into Scotland if we get a hot second. But we're mainly going to start discussing Henry VIII and the Anglican Church in England. And I love that story. I know all the wives and the reason why he dumped them. But we'll get there. All right. Anyway, so good talking to y'all today. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I hope to see y'all tomorrow. I know that we started lacrosse, and I know some other spring sports got kicked up as well, so looking forward to seeing y'all. We'll talk all about it then. Have a great rest of your weekend, guys. See you later, Honors.